Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban, certified executive leadership coach. And I have a question for you. Do you want to stress less? Of course you do. Who doesn't want to stress less in their lives? And I think this is a very timely topic. It might interest you to know that we can handle stress, or how we handle stress impacts those around us. And I know this very well because currently I'm having technical challenges in the studio. So, how I'm handling stress impacts my guest. But good to know that my guest, Ellen Leonard, is going to help me tremendously today about how to handle this challenge. Because how we handle stress literally does impact those around you. So, if you think this is a timely topic, come on in, join us for a casual conversation that is a catalyst for change. I want to say hi, say your name, say where you're from. I want to welcome you to the show because you, my friends, are very important. This is why we're here. Whether you are tuning in now or watching the replay, speaking of the replay, please don't forget to sign up for our YouTube channel so you can be the first to be notified when a live show is getting ready to come your way. And also catch up on any replays that you might have missed that day because I know you've got a busy life. So, as a bonus, elevating your well-being at work also increases attrition, improves collaboration, and reduces conflict. Well, how does that work? Because how you handle stress as a leader and as a fellow team member impacts those around you. So, in fact, your ability to handle stress has a much broader impact. Now, we're going to be talking about that with Ellen Leonard, my special guest today, how to manage stress better, her StressLess technique, because it's become a slightly crazy world. And I know this is a good time to have this topic. So, Ellen is a speaker, stress management consultant, coach, and expert who teaches coaches, business leaders, teams, and organizations on managing and preventing stress. With 9 years of leading the StressLess method, she has a master's degree in adult education, and she's a national board certified health and wellness coach. I want to give a warm welcome to Ellen. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Erin.
Absolutely, absolutely. So happy to have you on the show today. So tell me, I looked at your background. I'm interested to know what got you into focusing on how to help other people manage, deal with, and reduce.
Yeah, stress. How did I get started? Yeah, so once upon a time, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, I was a scientific researcher. So I ran labs, ran experiments, published papers, and I did that for like 12 years. And then one day, I was like, oh, I could do anything I wanted. I was on very clearly on a path that had been decided probably when I was just applying to college. And I hadn't really thought about whether or not I enjoyed it. It was just something I was good at. And so I started delving into wellness, just out of interest with my scientific background. And then I started to notice that I had a lot of tools for managing my stress.
Yeah.
And not everybody seemed to have those tools.
Okay.
And I mean, that was very concerning that,
Mm-hmm.
and also a lot of the wellness programming, whether at the university where I was working at the time, or in all of my friends who were in corporate, it wasn't sufficient to manage stress. It wasn't sufficient to really change behavior. It seemed to be all focused on exercise and nutrition, which are very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Oh,
not denying,
absolutely. I mean, that's a
yeah,
part of it. Yeah.
those things are important as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there seemed to be no direct focus on stress management. And if there was, it was always in the form of a lunch and learn, which lunch and learns are great for learning how to do a specific task, or, learning something that you can then apply in your life really easily, or how to do a specific sequence of things. But it's not really so great for changing health behaviors. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to translate that into a changed health behavior. And so for me, I was just like, yeah, that's not going to cut it. Like, if we really want to help people change. We really want to help people be healthier. And for me specifically, manage their stress more effectively. It has to be more, it has to be different. Can't just be throwing education at people and expecting them to be like, okay, well, now I know everything, so I'm just going to go and change everything about my life. If that were true, then I would always choose kale and not cupcakes. Spoiler alert. Cupcakes are hot in the lead.
How's that worked out for you?
It's really good. I do enjoy cupcakes, but it's so true. I know rationally with my brain that like when I look at these two choices, and we'll pretend that I'm not talking about an actual meal, but I might sometimes have cupcakes for actual meals. But like, like I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, here's something super healthy. But oh, look, there's this other thing in my house. But my brain knows. But those behavioral changes are rough.
They can be without almost immediate gratification. It's wonderful how our brains love that immediate gratification. That's why the cupcake is much more enticing.
Yeah, sure. But it depends on the cupcake, to be honest.
True. I mean, dried out and not very good. But a good cupcake or a bar of chocolate, like
cookies.
Yeah.
We're
talking about food.
Oh yeah, focus. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, we apologize. We got off topic.
But that's where some people go when it comes to dealing with stress. Because they do go to the food pantry because they're not quite sure what else to do. So their brain's like, well, I don't feel so good right now, so I know food makes me feel better. Yes. Or whatever that hit of dopamine is, whether it's scrolling on the Facebook or the YouTube. Yeah, we talked about that before we started the show as well. How that's sometimes very addictive and also not very helpful with dealing with stress, by the way. It doesn't help at all.
Yeah, there seems to be a mindset that if I ignore the stress, it will just go away. I mean, sometimes I'm a fan of that mindset as well, even though given my profession. But it turns out just ignoring it and hoping it'll go away like isn't an actual strategy. So, but I do enjoy a little. I tend to think of the food and the scrolling and the Netflixing and chill as a way to almost press pause on my stress so that I can almost get a better handle on it. And I find a lot of clients do that as well. Like when we break it down and we look at the why behind the behavior, like why they're choosing that, often it's like, okay, so this thing just happened. I need a minute.
Right.
I need a minute to like process some of that emotionally, mentally, physically,
or avoid it.
Yeah, or avoid it, and but then get back in the game. And I'm a fan of that because I find sometimes when people with their stress, when they pause and they take a beat, whether that's through an avoidance behavior or a healthier behavior like going for a walk or something like that, that then they can show up as a better version of themselves and deal with their stress a little bit more effectively. And so taking that beat and taking that pause is a really good technique.
Actually extremely important. I mean, based on the research that I've done, call it the power pausing. Even throughout the day, little micro breaks are tremendously refreshing for your brain, and not only extremely helpful from the neuroscience perspective, and needed, by the way. It's not really an option, but people like to pretend like it is, and they can just keep powering away. It doesn't work. But that micro pauses really, really help. Just taking a full break, breaking from what you're doing, taking your mind off of it and unplugging. It's very helpful.
Yeah. Giving yourself time and space to kind of process everything that's going on around you and that's happened so far, and then getting back in the game again. Yeah.
So what do you see in your clients as like one of the biggest number one sabotaging behaviors or contributors to stress and the lack of stress management?
That's such a good question. Give me a minute. Oh, this is really good. What is that? Yeah. I would say not viewing stress as important, meaning that I'm just going to push through. I'll just deal with this later, or everybody's stressed. It's fine. And having that kind of mindset instead of I'm almost like a passive approach to their stress. Like I just kind of like get through this. I'll feel better eventually instead of a proactive attitude towards stress, which is what I, of course, advocate for, is like, okay, what are your stressors? Why are they there? How are they affecting you? And what are we going to do about it? Let's have a plan. And so, yeah, so I think that the biggest block is not taking it seriously and how much it affects people's lives. So I hear that from clients all the time. They're like, until I did this workshop with you, or we did this one-on-one together, I had no idea how much stress was affecting my day-to-day life. Like different ways that it's impacting people physically, mentally, emotionally, and impacting all the people around them, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody knows when you're stressed. It's usually not a big secret, especially
And the
your
people
family.
that are close to you usually get the brunt of it as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I know for me, I mean, my husband gets it first, bless his heart. So he has very thick skin. God bless him. Yeah. Yeah. So being either like a true grit or just disconnecting from the stress, not actually being proactive or managing it or even trying to deal with it, is usually what we see. So true grit, I'm just going to push through this, and or this is what you're supposed to do. Work hard,
Yeah.
Stupid work hard method, which doesn't work, by the way.
Well, it works for a little while.
In a very short while.
Yeah.
But it actually long term does not net any positive results at all whatsoever. Or we see the complete disconnected and avoidance. I'm just going to go into my little hole and ignore the world, which also is not productive either.
Yeah. So it's really important to have strategies that work for you too. I also run into this thing where people have heard that this technique works. And it does. Like, certainly there are all these different techniques out there and different strategies and different resources, but I am a big advocate of finding the things that work for you specifically. Because even with scientific studies, and I'm admittedly a huge nerd, but like a great study will say like 8 out of 10 respondents found this helpful. And it's like, well, what about the other 2 people? Like, they're just,
it's not a one size fits all solution.
Yeah.
It really is very, very personal and depends upon that individual's, a whole host of things.
Yeah.
Like what's important to them, what drives them, what's their learning style, how does their brain latch on to information most quickly. I should be journaling. I'm crap at journaling.
I am too. I have never been good at journaling. I like taking notes, like I'm in class. I really like that.
Yeah, when I go to a conference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Then what happens? It's back here on the shelf.
Oh, no. I'm full nerd. I come home with multiple highlighters and colored pens, and I recopy my notes.
Really?
Like a complete nut job nerd. No, it's really, yeah. But I won't journal. Like, so yeah, so I won't journal. It's an interesting, it's just not for me, but I do know about the scientific benefits of that. And certainly some of my clients benefit from journaling a lot. Yeah. So
some people find it very helpful.
Yeah.
And I have a gratitude practice. It's just not a journaling gratitude practice.
Yeah.
Journaling, it just doesn't, and I love to write, which is, it's just weird. It's like, I love to write, you would think, but nope, journaling, and it's just, dear diary, no. I find like I keep repeating that. I'm like, no. What I will diary is I will chronicle my gardening experience.
Oh, I have a whole gardening notebook too.
Yes. It's really important because you forget, right? You're like, darn it, I should have done that thing with the peppers last month, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like we just had all these eggplant come due, and I'm just like, yeah, I gotta have a better plan for next time. I have 8 eggplants in my kitchen right now. What am I gonna do with 8 eggplants? Like, how do I plan? Yeah. Here is an eggplant, new friend. Like,
here.
But I think this is a really important point about stress that I think often gets overlooked. Is that stress is so personal. Not only what stresses you out. So, for example, in a team that you're managing, one person might hate to present and the other person thrives on it. There's nothing wrong with either. So acknowledging that different people stress in different ways, and that stress shows up differently for different people in different scenarios. One kind of stressor might make it so you can't sleep at night. Another kind of stress might cause you to have digestive issues. Another kind of stress might make you a little angrier than you usually are. Another one might make your brain race and kind of be overwhelmed. And there's
for
no
any of you tuning in either now or later, let me know, what's your stress response? I know mine, my shoulders, like,
oh, yep.
try to meet my ears, that kind of
They
thing.
just want to be friends. Your shoulders are just trying to be friendly.
Together and like have a reunion or something. I don't know.
They're just hanging out. They're just curious. Like, what's up with those earlobes?
That's one. It's somatic, what we call somatic response, a body physical response. And then it's almost like your stress capability is like a mug, right? And life, COVID, disaster fatigue, war, everything else is like get you to here, and then like anything else, it goes.
Yeah. That is a great way of expressing what I'm seeing with a lot of my clients right now. It's just we've reached our max capacity with stressors. And it's funny. Well, it's not really funny. Sorry, take that back.
Not funny.
It's interesting that humans aren't really designed to process long-term chronic stress. We're great at short-term. A lion's chasing me. Great. I got that. I mean, hopefully I got that. It's hopefully got that. But, like, okay, I can process that thing just happened, or like a work call didn't go well, or I'm giving a presentation and my tech cops out on me. Like, those are short-term acute stressors that I can, even something like parenting, which is technically a chronic stressor because it's never ending. But like, it's,
well, not anymore because they won't leave the house.
No. But the shorter term, you're not always stressed by it. But right now we're in the midst of just an unprecedented chronic stress where so many of the things that we're experiencing have no end in sight. So, like when we were all in college or school or whatever, finals are so stressful or school is so stressful, but it had an end point. Or like, parenting is so stressful, but eventually your kids will get out of the terrible twos. Eventually they'll become teenagers. Eventually they'll stop being teenagers and become fully grown adults. And eventually you'll finally get those grandchildren. But maybe.
Now let's not put that on them.
That's true.
Their own choice.
That's a good point. Strong point.
That could be an additional stressor there.
Strong point. But there's natural ends to all of these sequences, all of these natural life events that we've been built to endure. And so, people just, we aren't built to do this well. And that's why so many people are struggling, is because it's hard. It is
prolonged. It's prolonged. It's a prolonged degree of uncertainty. And I think it was a Harvard article, part of a Business Review article, that said our brains aren't equipped to handle this much uncertainty. And we're not. We're uncertainty averse. Yeah. Literally, we are. And you're right. Fight or flight. Sure, got that one. Run away from the thing. And we spend way too much time at flight or flight. But we've been in this mode for years.
Yeah.
So how important do you think it is, Ellen, for us to be very cognizant of what you can control and what you cannot control during times like these? Because it is
so important.
And there's so much you cannot control, yet we are investing heavily emotionally in these circumstances and events.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. One of the easiest ways to start managing our stress, not only long-term, but in real time, is to figure out ways that you can start taking back control, even of situations that are beyond your control. So this is actually it's so important. It's one of the first exercises I do with my one-on-one clients, is we pick a situation that's stressing them out, and we break it down into aspects of that situation that they can control and aspects that they can't. And my common example would be like, okay, so you're driving home from work and you're stuck in traffic. Well, you can't magically make the traffic disappear.
Would be nice.
I mean, if you can do that, then why are you even talking to me? Like, you should be out there doing something else with your magical powers.
Right.
But
making $1 bazillion.
But how can you make something that sucks more pleasurable and decrease your stress around it? And so as people dive into that, you can start to take back a little bit of control of specific situations. But I also find that in a moment when you feel overwhelmed, there's always something that you can do to take back control in the moment. So I have clients like organize their shock drawer or like do the laundry. They can check that they can do that. Like these are manageable tasks. These are things that you can do, things that you can complete, things that you can take back that feeling of control and start to build off of that, especially when you start to feel so overwhelmed and so powerless. And I find a lot of clients really do feel powerless against stress. Like it's just,
I want to key
yeah.
in on that because that's extremely important item you just brought up. The main catalyst, if you will, because I'm seeing a lot of PTSD for individual clients and having gone through just the pandemic. I mean, and everything
Mhm.
that we've gone through, there is a post-traumatic stress
Yeah.
response to that. When you feel helpless, that is the key for the limbic brain to go, okay, I'm etching this in memory and permanent memory. Now, there's obviously levels, like you're not being shot at. However, it still is extremely impactful. It impacts your behavior and your ongoing experiences. And it's permanently etched in your brain. You can't just go, let me just erase that, change it. No, no. But the key is when you feel powerless, when you feel helpless. So that is why it's so incredibly important for all of you, my friends out there tuning either now or later, to remember that you are incredibly impactful and empowered in your life, way more than you give yourself credit for.
Yeah. Yeah, people have a much larger role to play in their stress management
Mm-hmm.
than they realize. Often I find clients, and when I was teaching undergrads for years, I taught thousands of students. Um, they would often say to me, "Oh, you mean I can do something about this? I don't just have to be stressed?" And that was something that they would really start to be like it was a big aha. There's
Mm-hmm.
this kind of mindset that, well, stress is just going to happen to me, a passivity, that helplessness, like everything is stressful, stress just happens. And how do you start to take back that control and
Mm-hmm.
push back against that and start to really find your way back through,
Mm-hmm.
especially when things are so incredibly stressful?
Right, right. And it sounds like you shared a good first step with everybody is knowing what you can control and what you can't, and then really focusing on, okay, what in this do I have power over?
Yeah.
Even if it's taking, a more personal stressor, maybe it's not a pandemic or what have you. Like a friend is getting ready to fly to France. She was just exposed to COVID. Uh, can she control whether she gets it or not? No. So what do, right? What do you do
Yeah.
with that concern that's on top of your mind? And how do you manage that? And also knowing that's very personal how you deal with it, because some
Hmm.
people going out in the garden, like for me, that's a great stress relief.
Yeah.
Riding my bike is a good stress relief, refocusing. My gratefulness or gratitude practice and practicing mindlessness, as I like to call it, that helps me, but it may not help everybody.
And I think what you said is really important in that you have built these things into your daily life.
Hmm.
And that is essential when you're trying to take not only manage your stress in general, but feel like a sense of control,
Hmm.
because there are elements of your life and your day that you can consistently control. Like, I can control what I have for breakfast every day. I can control how I exercise. Like, there are things that I can do to empower myself in my day to day life. And that really starts to build and trickle out into the rest of my life pretty quickly, especially as you create habits. I really do build stress management, not only in my day to day life, but in weeks when I know things might be a little bit stressful. I especially talk to clients with this around the start of school, which I know is coming up for a lot of people, or the holidays, which is further off, but will creep in on us pretty quick. Is how do you start to think about, okay, so I know that that time's going to be a little extra hectic. what do I know would support me and my family, or if you're thinking
Mhm.
from a work perspective, my team, as we go through this this
Right,
knowingly a little bit more stressful time, this time that I
right.
know is going to be a little more heightened. And that can work for teams and organizations. Maybe they're having a big push for sales, maybe they're having a big deadline or a big project that's due, something like
Mhm.
that. And okay, so that week is going to be a little bit more stressful. What am I doing to support myself? How am I controlling what I can control in my
Mhm.
life to make sure that I can show up, especially when, like you said, our cup is full, our stress cup is maxed out. And so at this point, it's almost as if every little thing is more noticeable. Things that probably
Right.
didn't stress us out at all
Mhm.
before are adding stress to our lives more
Yeah.
easily and more frequently. And then we're like, oh, I'm a little more sensitive about that than I realized.
Right, right. Absolutely. I think we all have a heightened degree of sensitivity. So you mentioned, leadership in teams, and one of the things that we, set up before we started our live show today was talking about how you, the individual, impact those around you. So your ability to manage stress impacts other people's ability to manage stress as well. So I'd like to dive in to that a little bit with you, Ellen, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, what does that look like? What do you mean by, is it like, am I beaming stress management to people? What does that look like?
Well, kinda. So, um, I think there's a couple different layers to it. So certainly we've all had our boss, a boss that we know did not handle their stress well.
Oh, how
Yeah.
many of us have experienced that?
We're all thinking back, and hopefully none of us have ever been that boss or that leader that has not handled our stress in the moment well. But our team, like, people know, family knows, like, we know. And, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? You're wanting to show up not only in a leadership role, but, with your friends and family as this good version of yourself, the best version of you, which is going to be made pretty hard if you're not handling your stress really well. So there's that layer of negatively impacting people, but you can also positively impact people. Often there can be, I've seen a mindset where people want to hide their stress from their boss. They
Mm,
feel like, oh, this shouldn't bother me, or I should be able to handle this. And I find that usually comes from leadership, that's the kind of culture that they've created. And so I always encourage, when I'm doing like one-on-ones with the C-suite, when I go into an organization, I tend to work from the C-suite all the way down, doing one-on-ones and group coaching about stress. Um, is that when they acknowledge that they're stressed about something, that, like, say everybody's working on a project and there's a deadline, and if the leader's like, yeah, this is really hard, I'm stressed too. They're like, or something goes wrong, they're like, "Yeah, that was really awful. I'm so stressed about it. I'm really upset about it too." They share that.
mhm.
And I'm not talking about oversharing, but like, you share
Acknowledging.
acknowledging.
Acknowledging that there is an emotional side to it versus, okay, who's at fault and what do we need
Yeah.
to do to fix it?
Yeah.
That's usually
So
what
in
happens.
and just even that acknowledgement is so powerful, because then people are like, "Oh, it's not just me."
Right.
One of the biggest issues with stress is that it can be so isolating. You feel so alone in it. Like,
Mhm.
you could be in a team and nobody else appears to be bothered that you just lost this huge account and you're freaking out, and everybody else seems fine. And then if you start to talk about it, you find out, no, they're all upset. They're just processing it differently. It's showing up differently. And
Right.
so leading by example and then sharing what it is you do. Like, yeah, that yesterday was really rough. So I went home and I went for a run, and then I spent time with my kids.
Mhm.
And then I listened to my favorite song before I went to bed. This morning I woke up. I had that cup of coffee that I know I love, and I took a deep breath, and I got back in the day. What did you do to unwind last night? What did you?
And that also, by the way, for those of you tuning in, is a really good way to build rapport with your team and build that empathy level with your team as well,
Yes.
because it's extremely important in the now new, the great reset, how we're looking at the workplace much differently, particularly leadership.
Yeah, and it also really allows for your team and the people that work with you to feel heard.
Yes.
To feel heard and understood. Like, I know that often leaders feel like, well, what if it gets too personal? But I think people really, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think
It's a
people,
little okay.
it's a little okay.
Because you're not.
Yeah, it's a little okay for people to share some of their personal stuff. And I think, as a leadership in a leadership position, it's your ability to guide that, right? Like maybe you're going through something personally that's really challenging. Say you're going through a divorce and you're finding that hard as a leader. You could say, yeah, divorce is really hard and I'm really struggling sometimes. Here's what I'm doing to do it. But you're obviously not sharing the details of that,
Right. And
right?
I don't recommend, by the way, sharing much about your divorce at work. But yeah, I mean, some simple things.
But things,
It's simple, but it's not like you said, oh, yeah, I went home last night and got drunk.
yeah, and hopefully leaders aren't sharing that.
Depends on the company.
Although, yes, and maybe you work for a wine or beer company and you're like, I went home and enjoyed our Chardonnay last night and it was a really good night.
That's a different conversation.
It's a different conversation.
Yeah, good branding conversation there. But yeah, I mean, it's okay for it to be a little personal. And I think the biggest mistake people on every level make, not just leaders, particularly the driven high achievers that I coach, is not connecting to their personal life a little bit at work.
Yeah.
It's very important for people to know you.
And you can choose things to share. I mean, common things are, what you're doing to exercise, right? Mm-hmm. Or how you love to cook or how you love to garden. There's just things that are not hot topics or not very that are just kind of, ambiguous, and you just share them. Mm-hmm. And it's a lovely way to connect to people, especially if you're sharing how you're using it to manage your stress. Yeah, I got to go home and play with my kids last night. It was really good. Mm-hmm. We had a really good time. I'm so glad that I made time for that.
And what happens, Ellen, when you fall victim to the old historical paradigm of leadership and you don't share anything and you just try to be this, I'm going to handle the stress person, and you're not handling any of it, of course. What happens to your teams?
Yeah, the people that are not handling the stress, it's going to leak out. It seeps out in so many different ways, not only how you behave at work and to your employees, but in your productivity, your creativity, your ability to problem solve, and then it trickles home as well. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, citing research, it's been proven that it affects decision-making capabilities, stress response, emotional, cognitive function, communication, all of it breaks down. So it's important. I mean, it's not just important from the empathy level, but it's also important for you to be able to show up 100%. So being proactive and reaching out to Ellen and developing your management method is really kind of important on multiple levels. And that's another reason why, well-being, quote unquote, hashtag well-being at work is more of a topic right now than ever.
Yeah. And I think I think maybe 10 years ago, stress is important. But I think now it's essential to really,
it's well-being is non-negotiable now.
Yeah, it's not. There's no way to separate it out.
And like we mentioned before we started the show, please don't try to shove people into these old paradigms that don't work, overwork them, make them wear multiple hats, give them ridiculous deadlines, too much work, and then part of your well-being management or your well-being self-care strategy is to hire a therapist so they can deal with all that crap. No, that is not going to help your attrition.
Yeah. And ideally you get to the point where you don't need somebody like me, right? Ideally, trainings like mine and the work that I do is to set people up to not need me anymore. I want people to learn how to manage their stress. I want them to become better at it. I want it to become an integrated part, not only of the businesses and companies and organizations I work with, but with the one-on-one clients, right? That they just go off and they now know how to manage their stress proactively for the rest of their lives.
Right. Yeah, that's very powerful. So anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up the show today, Ellen?
Yeah, I think that stress is incredibly important, in case you didn't get that already. And I love
Cool.
I love talking about it, and I offer workshops and one-on-ones. So if anybody's interested in having me come to speak or working on their stress management personally, I am here for that and very excited to offer any resources that I can. So I hope people will reach out and I can help you manage your stress. It is possible to do something about it. It is possible
Absolutely.
for things to be different.
It is. And you do have much more impact and control over your experiences than you could possibly ever realize. So, whether you're watching now or tuning into the replay later, if you have questions, have any comments at all, feel free to reach out to us directly. And until next time, my friends, keep elevating. Ta-ta for now.
Bye.